Hello and welcome to part three of how many billions are lost due to poor lubrication practices each year. Uh, at the end, or in part two of this series, I went through an example of the gearbox, which was failing every 8 to 9 years, and I asked the question, why are these uh, gearboxes, reducers, failing in such a short time? And you might think it's just the level of contaminants, but you'd be wrong. That's only part of the answer. And what I'm going to do in part three is explain that it's a bit more involved than that. So what I'm going to look at is the viscosity of this reducer. That, like I said, has a SHC 150 synthetic oil. It's been in the reducer most of its life. I mean, this data goes back to 1999, so they've had a 150 oil in this reducer for its entire life. So apart from in 2024, where you see a slight dip in viscosity, maybe somebody put the wrong oil in or overheated, don't know, but it's been pretty consistent between 145 and 155, which is normal for a 150 oil. So let's look at the OEM manual lubrication recommendations. On the left is recommendations for viscosity, depending on the RPM output speed and the ambient temperature. They're recommending an oil anywhere from a 68 all the way up to a 320. And on the lubrication maintenance, they're saying a maximum oil change interval of 1 year. So they're recommending, based on the ambient temperature, pick whichever one, and on the oil change, don't go more than a year. This is absolute rubbish, and it's typical what you see in OEM magazines. So I'll talk about the viscosity first of all. So imagine you're sat in your living room and it's minus 30 degrees outside. I'm sitting there and I've got my Canada Goose coat on because it's freezing outside. But inside, it's 20 degrees because that's the temperature I like it to be. You'd be cooking. So my point of this is the oil doesn't care what the temperature is outside. All it cares about is the temperature it's experienced inside the reducer. So if you've got a 68 or a 320, that's basically what you're trying to avoid is contact between the surfaces. Right? So what this company did, they went midway, didn't go for a 320, didn't go for a 68, they just picked a 150 based on environmental conditions. Wrong answer. So what they also do is, well, the manual says I'll change oil every year, so I'll change oil every year. Mineral oil, synthetic oil, doesn't matter. I'm going to change oil every year. Again, that's, excuse my French, BS. Synthetic oils, if they're monitored, kept clean, you're doing oil sampling, I've seen them last up to 10, 12 years plus. So why would you throw away good oil based on the fact that the manufacturer recommends you do that? Not the manufacturer of the oil, the manufacturer of the reducer. So that is all. This is all 1970s thinking. Things have moved on since then. Well, we hope they have. So I talked a bit more about fatigue because that's what we've seen in the OPC, the oil analysis data. So if you Google what causes fatigue wearing a gearbox, you'll bring up something like this data here. So it talks about high cyclic stresses, inadequate material properties, material fatigue and stress concentrations, improper lubrication, and overloading. So out of that list, there's realistically, from a maintenance perspective, there's only one thing you can be proactive and do something about, and that's improper lubrication. So insufficient or contaminated lubrication can increase friction, lead to higher temperatures, and accelerated wear. The rest is basically, from the maintenance department's perspective, is out of your domain. You can't do anything about that. I'm going to talk about fatigue failure and why you're seeing that in the oil sample results. So there's two reasons. You've got what's called two body abrasive wear and three body abrasive wear. And And the two-body abrasive wear, you're basically relying on the fluid film thickness. In other words, the viscosity of the oil at a certain temperature to prevent those two mating surfaces or those two surfaces coming together and creating abrasive or fatigue failure. So what happens is these asperities, as I like to call them, will bang into each other, create fatigue and snap off, and that's how you end up with the particles of wear creating more damage. And when you get into the third body wear, those are the particles that break off, or the dirt that's added to the equipment when you're putting in what you think is clean oil. So two things: insufficient fluid film thickness and high ISO count levels will lead to fatigue failure. So the consequences: there's approximately 200 reducers, multiple large lubricating system, hydraulics, all have similar contamination issues in this plant. Also, I've got the same issues. Some fortunately have the right oil, but the majority of the reducers, they just went for the 150. That way, it's simple. Everything takes a 150. I don't need 3 or 4 different viscosity grades of oils. And I've seen that in multiple plants, multiple applications. One size doesn't fit all. So the question is, what is the financial impact of this plant based on observed oil analysis data and trends? Is it a couple of 100,000? Is it millions? Is it billions? So average size plant, mine site, what would be the consequences of failure?